wherever you're transitioning from here. Welcome back, everyone. Gonna get rolling here. Meeting is being recorded. Thank you, Leslie. She's behind the scenes. She pushes all the buttons and makes sure that we stay on track. Shares all the
We got,
things. Thank you.
and Rebecca, we've got some good mornings in the chat. Ooh, we got some morning
Good.
folks. Good morning, everybody. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right.
We made it back. Session 2. Well, today's session is, as you can see on the screen, is our session on board governance. We'll talk a little bit more about the agenda and what we're going to cover today. But certainly, if we go to the next, there we go. You all know the drill by now with Zoom. We invite you to go ahead and raise your hand if you want to have a question or you want to be featured to be recognized by us, so we'll know that you have a question, and then use that chat for any questions and comments. And we also encourage you to enable your video during the discussion. It helps us to feel more and more like we're in the same space together. But we also understand at times if you need to have your video off, we understand. So don't stress. And let's go to the next screen. What do we got here? Okay, so for today's session, we're gonna have a quick introduction, which we're in the midst of right now. We'll go over the capacity assessment results and findings. We pulled together sort of the top practices that people selected from each of the sections that we cover. We'll go over that briefly. We'll be covering, we'll probably have a short break after that. And then we'll dive into our board governance section. We'll cover duties and expectations, financial management and fundraising responsibilities, funding human resources and what that looks like, accountability and evaluation, and then we'll close out with board composition and our bylaws and legal compliance for board governance. Make sure that you have paper, pencil, pens, markers around you. You can grab them during a break, our first break if you need to. But make sure that you have what you need in front of you to participate.
Rebecca, before
Yeah.
we go into the breakout, if we could go back to the gallery, that would be great. Sorry for
No
interrupting you.
worries. So we're going to start off with just quick breakout for getting acquainted with one another. So we'll do quick introductions in your groups, and we would like for you all to just share briefly, and I mean briefly because it's going to be quick, what your nonprofit or your organization is known for. This is beyond just your mission. So what is sort of your identity within your community? What are you all known for beyond your mission? Does that make sense? All right. And we're not going to do, for today's, at least for this breakout, we're not going to do breakouts by role. We're just going to go ahead and put you all into a few breakout groups just randomly. So you get to know some new people. And let's see if we do, I think I'm going to do 7
Uh,
breakout
and
rooms.
while Rebecca is getting ready for that, what is there anything that you remember very clearly, matter of fact, from last Tuesday's work? What comes to mind for you for last Tuesday? That you say, I'm very clear about that. I get it. I understand it. Anything that comes to mind for you that you recall, and you can put it in the chat, or uh, you can unmute yourself if you'd like. So we did our kind of getting grounded in capacity, assessing capacity, and kind of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits framework. That was kind of the overarching work that we did last week. Just kind of getting ready to go into our very first topic on board governance of the 6 topics we're going to cover. But I'm just curious to know what comes to mind for you in terms of what we covered last week. Woohoo! There's a lot of popcorn happening in the chat. So let's see. Let me just take a look at what we're what we recall. Okay. So again, last week we were meeting for the first time, getting started in all of our understanding what it is that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. Scope and scale really resonated with me, especially after conducting the capacity assessment. We established a common framework and vocabulary to discuss the overall concepts related to organizational structure. An organization can be in the thrive or sustain area, but also be working on items in the build area. The principles on my roadmap for organizing our nonprofit. There are a lot of places for growth, and I have a foundation for that growth to move forward. Good. I don't know, Rebecca, I might be missing something in there, but there's, thank you all for chiming in on that.
Yep, that's great. All
All right,
right.
well, we're gonna let Rebecca place you in your breakout rooms, and
Thanks. Yeah,
here
thanks
you
for
go,
that
Rebecca.
extra time, Dr. Palmer, to put those together.
Uh-huh.
Because I almost forgot
Yeah.
about them. I can't do them until everybody's in the room. So
Yeah.
we're going to break off, and you all will talk about, you'll introduce yourselves briefly. You'll talk about what your organization or nonprofit is known for, just beyond your mission. What are you all known for in your community? And we'll give you 10 minutes and we'll come back after that. Welcome back. You folks trickling in. All right. Did anybody learn anything new about an organization you'd like to share? We have one or two share back. Anything they found interesting from their breakouts, learning about one another, their organizations, and what they're known for beyond their mission.
And you can unmute yourselves, or you can use the chat, either one.
Yep.
And there is someone has some feedback. So if you're, if you could just keep yourself muted. Yeah,
I think I
thank
see
you.
what the problem
I
is.
don't know. It sounded like a radio.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. I saw someone who was unmuted who didn't intend. This is the stuff, I'll just say, this is the stuff that you want to share with potential board members.
Uh-huh.
What is your organization known for beyond your mission? And they should be asking you that question too, right? Because they want to know, they want to look under the behind the screens and kind of see what's going on behind the scenes, but also learn sort of what your reputation is in the community. What sort of things are you known for? Anyone want to be brave to share?
Or anything you heard. Maybe it's not your organization, but there's something that you heard your colleagues share that you thought, that's good. Or something you might want to borrow.
Mm-hmm.
I can just say, generally speaking, it was nice to connect with people across the state. My organization serves the 6 counties in the Southeast area. And so it's nice to be able to connect and hear what other people are doing across the state. While they're all very different from us, it kind of puts us on the same page together. So that was nice.
And Casey, what's the name of your organization? I'm looking at my roster here, but
Community Care of the Lower Cape Fear.
okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything you heard, or is there anything you'd like to borrow from some of your colleagues in terms of what makes their organization interesting, or what are you known for beyond your actual mission?
I would like to just say, in the group that I was in, I learned, well, let me just start off with saying, my name is Shamel Justice. I am the president for Showcase for Change. And the group that I was in, we were talking about, like you said, what if we're known for in the community? And I was telling everybody, just to sum it all up, anything to do with arts programs and collegiate level, high school level, middle school level, we step in and help out when we're wanted or needed.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
one thing that I actually got a chance to talk about with the members in my group was one of their organizations actually partners with someone. So it's, you know, they were just explaining what are the benefits of having a partnership
mhm,
with another organization, but at the same time trying to navigate an uncertain time period with also, with your annual budget planning and, you know, things you already had set in stone. Like she was telling me that she's already have something in stone for the next 4 years, but it's still something that you have to navigate within the time period that you're in. So it was just something
mhm.
that I learned.
Okay, okay. And there's something in the chat there, Rebecca, and then we'll move on to our new information. I think I saw
Oh,
a couple of,
this is a nice way to close this one out. Megan said,
okay.
I thought it was interesting or beautiful that one organization cares for the land they are on. And that is very fitting for Earth Day.
Yes, yes,
I
it is. Yes, it
love that.
is.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being a part
Mhm.
of that.
Thank you, everyone.
Mhm.
Well, we are going to be talking about and learning about board governance today. But before we jump into our first topic of the series, as it relates to management, we're going to do just a little bit of work and talk about the results and findings of the capacity assessment that you all did individually, and you should have received yours. And then we also have the collective group in terms of what we want to work on over the next year. Uh, do keep in mind that at the end of each session, we have an evaluation and we ask for your feedback. We try to make adjustments based on what you tell us each and every session. So we debrief after each session, we review your comments and feedback, and we try to make adjustments accordingly. So that's very, very helpful. So keep it coming with that. The other thing is that at the end of every session, we do stay on in case some of you have questions. So we stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes or so, just if there's anything that you have questions about related to that topic. So keep that in mind as well. We don't just run off when we close out. We hang out here for just a little bit. So if there's something that you might want to ask about, you can certainly, and you don't want to do it in the larger group, you can certainly do it at that time. So in terms of our work today, again, team, if we could go to slide 10. We introduced you to our framework yesterday, and some of you mentioned that in the reflection question that I posed. But here is our framework, and what we do is we craft our work at the center, information, services, resources for our members in alignment with the 12 principles that we introduced you to last week. And as a part of those 12 principles, we also share with you how we identify where a nonprofit might be in terms of its management condition. And so that is framed around whether a nonprofit is, in terms of the practices, whether a nonprofit is primarily in the build kind of frame or the thrive or sustain. And we're going to look at those results today to just kind of add another layer to that. There are 12 principles, there are 216 practices, and we can assess capacity using our principles and practices guidebook in two ways. We can do a basic kind of level of assessing capacity, which we did last week, and then we do what we called an advance, which is the 6 management functions that you spent time on last week assessing capacity. And so we're going to share those results. In terms of capacity assessment and capacity building, if we could go to slide there, thank you. So sometimes we are queried as to what we mean when we talk about capacity. And so we have crafted a way of describing capacity whenever we are doing the work that we do, and then also as it relates to this institute. So when we think about capacity, capacity is reflected in a nonprofit's ability to manage growth and development to achieve its mission and vision. We also think about capacity in terms of the nonprofit organization's agility, ability and agility to manage growth and development. And here lately, and someone put this in the chat, we do look at a nonprofit organization in terms of the scope and scale of its work and what its mission is. And we know that we would like to address all things in our community related to our mission. However, you all are, and we are one nonprofit. And so it takes all of us to really, really make a difference and to address issues in our community. And so this idea of capacity is around our nonprofit's ability to do its work. And then we assess that capacity by reviewing and examining, using our framework, the current management condition of that nonprofit to determine the principles and practices in need of enhancement so that we can continue to grow and develop. When we suggest or when we begin to do capacity building, we see that as a way or a process of implementing strategies and techniques for growth and development to achieve our mission and vision. And those strategies and techniques might be that we're building capacity through training. It might be that we're building capacity through getting technical assistance or receiving some consultation or going out and bringing in professional development resources for individuals in our organization. And so capacity building is customized based on what we have determined as a result of the capacity assessment. So we assess capacity and then we begin to decide how are we going to go about growing and developing our nonprofit or enhancing capacity. So capacity assessment, capacity building. Team, if we could go back to gallery, I just want to pause here for any questions or thoughts about capacity assessment, capacity building. And this is on page 84 in your workbook as well. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment and give you a chance to take a look at that. Capacity assessment, capacity building. And assessing capacity is a healthy exercise for staff, especially staff who may not necessarily have an understanding of the big picture. Sometimes if staff and our board members, if we have a sense of kind of what the big picture is, oftentimes we might better understand why we're utilizing a certain strategy or why we're approaching a particular aspect of how our organization operates. It may help people to better understand it and also kind of align with what it is that you're trying to do. Any thoughts or comments there before we move into looking at the capacity assessment results? then we will pull up the, and if you do, we're gonna come back together again in the gallery here in a minute. We're gonna go ahead and take a look at and show you the cohorts results in terms of what we were able to find out. So you should have received your individual results as it relates to the assessment. And again, we are looking at the 6 management functions that we're going to be covering in this institute. And of course, today we're going to kick that off with board governance. And so as we look at board governance, under build and under sustain is kind of where the majority of us kind of decided that these were areas that we wanted to work on over the next year. And so one was job descriptions and orientations for our board members. Notice under Thrive, there was a tie there for looking at expectations of our board members and then also demographics and characteristics. And then under Sustain, the number one area for the cohort was to make sure that we as board members understand our roles and responsibilities and that we evaluate performance. And we're going to really touch on all of those things today as it relates to board governance. Program design, management, and evaluation. This particular management function the results showed that majority of us want to enhance this area. A significant number. As we go through the others, you'll see it. And so across the board, program design, management, and evaluation was a number one area. So that helps us that when we get to that topic, we know kind of what to spend a significant amount of time on. And then under strategic planning, it was really documenting success and lessons learned. That was the number one area that the cohort said it wanted to work on over the next year. And I will say, we do oftentimes forget to celebrate, or we forget to make note because we're doing so much. We forget to make note of the success that we experience and also taking time to celebrate those successes. Lessons learned as well to inform us as we move along in the work that we do in managing our nonprofit organizations. Financial management, the number one area that the cohort indicated that we wanted to work on over the next year was to identify and implement new revenue generating strategies. And so we're going to spend some time on that. We know that we've been hit with COVID, right? We were in post-COVID, and now we've got kind of some kind of political kind of things happening in our sector, or that's impacting our sector. And so this idea of what do we do? And we know that some of us, even in this cohort, in this session today, we are working in a space where we don't know where our dollars are coming from, or we don't know if our funding is going to be impacted. So this idea of looking at new revenue generating strategies is one that is at the top of the list for a lot of nonprofits across the sector. So team, there's a couple comments in the chat, I think. So we'll get to those in just a minute. And then fundraising, the number one area was to consider new income resources. So that aligns with what's over in financial management. So we'll definitely spend time there. And then human resources is our 6th topic. And it was kind of balanced across all these areas. So that tells us that this is an area that we want to, really kind of spend time across all of the practices here. And we do have specific pieces of work and information that we will share as it relates to that topic when we get to it, that really aligns with what you have here. So thank you for contributing to that. And I don't know if there are, we'll go back to the gallery and let's see what's in the chat, Rebecca. And then we will take any comments or questions that folks might have before we go into our next part of our work.
Yeah,
Uh,
Steph noted if we will be allowed to continue with nonprofit status.
Can you speak to that? Are you,
Oh, there's just been a lot of rumors I work for an environmental justice nonprofit that those groups might be targeted with an executive order challenging their nonprofit status, whether they're allowed to pursue certain goals like environmental justice or climate, whether those will be allowed. So you were just mentioning the uncertainty.
yes,
And I said,
yes.
right now, so we'll see. There was a lot of expectation that that would happen on Earth Day. So I hope it doesn't happen. But
Mhm.
it's very anxiety producing for the community.
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. It is, you know, operating in a space of uncertainty when there are a lot of moving parts. I mean, we're human beings first, right? Before we are that staff person or that board member or, you know, and so taking these hits, you know, even if it's just hearing that there may be some degree of loss or some impact on our resources that's negative, we have to kind of really give ourselves some grace in that. And also take time to really kind of pause and understand where you are individually. So thank you for sharing that, because that has to be a tough situation to be in. And as we prepared for this particular cohort for the Institute, this go round, we spent a lot of time talking about that, what you all's realities might be as you are trying to participate in this experience. You've got all these things that's happening all around you, and we recognize that. So definitely thank you for sharing that. Any thoughts about the results that we shared with you? Or your results that you know, once you got your report back? Any initial reaction to what you saw? So sometimes when we see things in writing, it hits us a different way. Okay. Well, we're going to jump into our topic for today, which is board governance. How many of you have access to your bylaws? How many of you have access to your bylaws? And how many of you read and understand your bylaws? Because that is the foundation of how your nonprofit's board should be governing. It starts with the bylaws. How many of you've never seen the bylaws? Like you've never even had an opportunity to see the bylaws. If not, I would encourage you to ask. Bylaws have to be written and submitted to the Internal Revenue when your nonprofit applied for its 501c3 status. So there had to be a set of bylaws at that time. And I know some of your organizations are 100 years old, over 100 years old. As a matter of fact, probably some of your organizations that are that old, your bylaws were typed on a typewriter. So I've seen bylaws that were actually typed on a typewriter. I haven't seen any bylaws that were handwritten yet, but I've seen bylaws that have been typed on an old school typewriter. And so if you have not had the opportunity to review your bylaws, or you've never seen the bylaws of your nonprofit, when you start to engage in building your capacity around board governance and oversight, it starts with the bylaws. The bylaws instruct the board on how it is supposed to function. It provides guidance for that. That's the starting point. And so, very important for you to have access to the bylaws and also to be quite familiar with your bylaws. Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, real quick diversion, if you will, to share a little bit about our LinkedIn group and see, we pose questions in there. I know a good number of you have joined that group. Let me pull it up so I can share with you. But we pose weekly questions in there for folks to comment on and share based on their feedback with the rest of the group. And you can see here, this is the group. And our question for this week was, in your experience, what practices have had the greatest impact when it comes to developing an engaged, more active board? And we're starting to get some responses coming in. We invite you all to go ahead and join if you haven't yet, if you're interested in joining the group, to comment on this post sometime when you have a chance. Dosali, I really appreciate your transparency here and your honesty about this is a major area that you need assistance with. So let's all help out Dosali and one another to kind of share ideas here. This is a great place to kind of add some comments and some feedback on this question. And we'll have future questions for other topic areas that we want to compile here. I also did want to share that I shared down below, you'll see articles that Dr. Palmer has put on her LinkedIn page. They're great 1 minute look, 1 minute read. Who has more time than 1 to 2 minutes for a quick read, right? A little break. And one of the ones that she just posted was ways to recruit volunteers to serve as officers on a board. So this is linked on the LinkedIn group page. It's something that Dr. Palmer puts out there just to be a leader in the space and to be a thought partner. So this is a great way for you all to just sort of read up on some of these and join a group who's like-minded and wanting to support one another in this role that we're all in. So I'll stop sharing. Thanks everyone for letting me plug in here for a little bit.
Thank you, Rebecca. Awesome. So in your workbook on page 31, we have kind of shared with you a way of either defining or describing what a board of directors is. And then also, we have also provided kind of a description of a board member. And the reason that we separate those two is because when individuals serve on your board, they have individual representation. And when they come together as a collective, then they become that board of directors that's providing that overall governance and oversight to your nonprofit organization. In your bylaws, the bylaws give instructions, or I would say guidelines, as to how the board is supposed to function. And it's divided into different sections and talks about provides different types of guidance for us. And we're going to get into that too. But it is important that we represent a board when we serve on a board, and or when you are working with your board. These are individuals who are bringing a certain set of resources, be it themselves, to that work, to the board of directors work. And then again, as a collective, our board of directors provides this kind of group or coming together or body to provide governance and oversight. We are expected to have a board of directors. Board of directors members, when a nonprofit starts, are named in the application that is submitted to the Internal Revenue. And it's important to have, obviously, to have board members. And so we took the time to kind of lay that out in thinking about that a little bit separately. Another thing I want to add here is we also have, once we have that board in place, we identify officers. And we're going to go in some detail with that as well. we identify who's going to serve as the board chairperson or board president, depends on your nonprofit as to how you name that person. That role is described in your bylaws. Then there's oftentimes a vice president or vice chair. And then on occasion, there might even be a chair-elect or sometimes it's the vice chair, but sometimes it's a different role. And then secretary treasurer. Those typically are the officers of of a nonprofit organization, and they serve as the executive committee. And they work in partnership with the ED, the executive director, or they work in partnership with the CEO. And they work to help to lead the organization and to help to foster activity and work and engagement of the board members, because these individuals are serving as officers. And as Rebecca mentioned, the topic for the latest LinkedIn article is related to recruiting individuals specifically to serve in officer roles. And I chair a board right now, and we have had, for the past 2 years, it has been very challenging to recruit a treasurer. So I am not suggesting that it's easy to do, but it has its challenges. But that group of individuals, if we can get them in place and equip them to serve in their roles, they can be a great help for the EDs and the CEOs that are in this space today. They can be a big help to the ED and CEO once we can get them in place. And again, I know sometimes it can be difficult and challenging to do that. And so it's important to just kind of remember that they do serve as human resources to help the organization, and specifically partner with the executive director or the CEO. As we think about the board of directors, the board members, the officers, so we're talking about board governance here. We as a team began to ask the question, is this concept of a board of directors and board engagement, is it a science or is it an art? Is it a science to this or an art to this? And team, if you could show slide 17, I want us to kind of pause here just a little bit and give everybody time to take a look at this imagery that we've selected for this part of our work today. So the question is, go back, there we go, thank you. So the question is distinguishing between the science versus the art of an engaged and active board. So distinguishing between the science versus the art of an engaged and active board. Think about that for a minute. Think about that for just a minute. And so my question to us is, what do you think? Is this idea of fostering an engaged and active board, is it science? Is it a science or is it an art? And I'd like to hear your thoughts about this. And you can unmute yourself and speak. I see Martha says in the chat that she thinks it's both.
I agree.
Any-
I agree. It's both. Especially the
any-
emotion,
Mhm.
especially the emotions part when you care about the nonprofit you're with, like Miss Steph with the Environmental Protection Agency, myself with helping out veterans. I mean, it should be a blend of both, of science and art, especially when you truly care about the cause you're doing. You can be
Okay.
anywhere else, but you chose this because you are staunchy about change.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Want to put voice to your thoughts about this?
I think it's a combination of both because I think you'll use like one side of your brain, like the science side, because you want to be able to kind of analyze the people that you're bringing on. Are they going to fit with the rest of the board? Are they going to fit with your teams and those types of things? But then also, because we're a nonprofit, you want someone, you need the logic side, but then you also need someone who can get creative when it comes to fundraising in the environment we're in, or get creative when it comes to reporting or bringing in new board members. And you want someone that's passionate about what you do, because most of the time they're not paid. And if they are, it's a very small amount. And so that passion's what's going to drive them to help your organization move forward the way that you want it to.
Now, Hannah, you said, were you just saying in terms of being paid, just that they're volunteers and they're not paid?
Yeah, our board is completely volunteer. I know some do get paid on other boards, but ours it's new and it's small. And so they're completely volunteer based.
Okay, all right. Well, if your organization is a 501c3, the practice is that your board members are not paid. They can be reimbursed for engagement, as far as if they're going to a conference or they're doing something like that, they can be reimbursed for things. But in terms of being paid, 501c3 board members, it is more than not, they are not paid. And in your bylaws, it would indicate that, and if there was a notation that board members were being paid and you attach that to your 501c3 application, you'd probably get a lot of questions and querying back from the Internal Revenue. So I just want to make sure that that if that is a practice, this is for the group. If that is a practice, then I'm guessing that's a unique kind of situation.
Yeah, and we don't pay our board members. I think I was just thinking about like general boards and just boards in general, because I have like some with corporations, they do get paid, but ours definitely do not get paid.
Correct. Thank you for sharing. So this notion of, and here's where the language is important in terms of what we're trying to share here, in terms of the science of engaged and active board. That's what we're focused on here. What we hear more times than not is our board of directors is not engaged. Our board of directors is not active. We don't know how to get them more engaged. We hear it from board chairs, we hear it from officers, we hear it from EDs, we hear it from CEOs of nonprofits. And we would agree with you that it is a combination, that the science of it is the management part of it. And it starts with the bylaws, because we can hold board members accountable to those bylaws and whatever guidelines it is that we introduce and explain to them at the onset. So when they join your board, we should be very, very clear about what the expectations are. And so that's the management, the science, managing the board, managing the work of the board and how it does its work. And it comes from and it stems from the bylaws. The art is the leadership part. So this managing our nonprofits, nonprofit management and nonprofit leadership. The art of it is, how do we lead this group of individuals? How do we lead them as one body? And then also, how do we lead with them on a one-on-one basis? Our EDs and CEOs, this is a part of this is where we come in to begin to work in partnership and to engage and work with our board members in ways that align with what they bring to the organization. And so the science versus the art. Our focus here today is the management of an engaged and active board. It's the mechanics of managing a board. That's our focus in this institute. It is, what are the things that we need to be focused on? What do we need to be mindful of as it relates to how to manage the board of directors' work and how it does the work that it does. And again, I started off by asking, how many of us have access to our bylaws? How many of us understand what's in our bylaws? How many of us understand, kind of the framing in which this, or the framework in which this group of individuals is supposed to work? Whether it's 3 board members, whether it's 5, whether it's 25, whether it's 100, whether they're local, whether they're scattered around the state, whether they're from different geographic locations in the nation, or whether you have international board members. So it is, how does this board, what should we think about in terms of management? And then again, the focus for the Institute, our focus today is on the science. It's on the management. It is, what is it that we need to have in place such that we can be in alignment with those guidelines that we crafted or that were crafted for this particular nonprofit organization. And so science versus art. Science versus art. We're focusing on the science for this institute. Team, if we could go back to gallery, I'm thinking that a break is in line. So art and science, we're focusing on the science. When we come back, we're going to continue to focus on the management of our board of directors in terms of its work. Rebecca, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. Let's see, it's 10:28. Can we come back at 10:36, 10:37? We'll give you guys a little over 5 minutes for a break. I know it's not much,
All
but
right.
we'll be back at 10:36, 10:37.
Is to look at this from the perspective of the managing our board of directors work and having expectations that align with our bylaws. That's where it begins. Give me an idea of how old your nonprofit is, like how many years. Put it in the chat for me. Just give me like what, either you can put the year it started, or you can just give me the years. How long has your nonprofit been in existence? Kind of put that in the chat for me. I just want to get an idea of, are we startup, or have we been around for decades, or, okay, I see. Yeah, okay. Great. 50 years, I see that. 95 years. Some of you are probably those nonprofits that had bylaws that were typed on a typewriter. 95 years and 50 years ago. Now, I have another question for you. How many of your nonprofit organizations have amended your bylaws that you know of? And if you have, how many times have you amended the bylaws? So let's just say the organization that's 95 years old. How many times have the bylaws been amended? Okay. Okay, I'm looking here. When your bylaws are amended, the bylaws should be dated. So there should be a way to date and or stamp those bylaws to show how many times your bylaws have been amended. And there should be archives of the bylaws prior to the amended bylaws. So there should be a place where we're saving and storing these bylaws because this is the document that we are going to share with those new board members when we recruit them. Minimally, we should be sharing the bylaws with them and helping them to understand the bylaws. So that's very important to remember and to understand. So as we move into our next piece of information, so we We covered the art and science. We're going to lean into the science. We're going to lean into how to manage a nonprofit organization, and we're utilizing the bylaws as our springboard to that. And the bylaws inform us and guide us. Bylaws can be amended. Bylaws can be amended. They can be changed. And so that's important to understand. As our nonprofit is growing and developing, it's changing. You know, even the community in which your nonprofit was established, it changes. And so sometimes it's important to make those adjustments in our bylaws. So it is important to understand and remember that. Another thing that we want to point out is to understand how a nonprofit is organized. So if we're looking at an org chart, right, and we want to explain how a nonprofit is organized and where the board of directors fit in that org chart. And so if I could get you to grab a piece of paper, just a piece of paper, a pen, pencil, marker, crayon, you know, whatever you have near you. And we're going to show you an org chart, and we're also going to show you different positions as it relates to a nonprofit. And we want you to place those into this org chart. And so team, if you would show slide 18, hopefully you have your piece of paper, you got your pen, your pencil, your crayon, all of that. So here is our org chart image. And so place in this org chart where the board of directors goes, where the executive director is, where the volunteers are aligned, the staff, and the and 4 board committees. And there could be more committees, but for the purpose of the exercise, we have 4. So that would be board committee 1, board committee 2, board committee 3, board committee 4. So place on the org chart where you would locate these roles. Give you about 30 more seconds to do that. Again, we start here because it's important for us to understand kind of the organizational structure of a nonprofit so that we have a sense of how the organization is structured in general, so that we kind of know and understand where the board of directors fit in that org structure. Okay. Everybody got their, so you can unmute yourselves or you can put it in the chat. What goes in that top box? What goes there?
The board of directors?
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's where the board of directors goes. And then where does the executive director, where does that go?
The second middle box.
The second middle box, thank you. And then where do volunteers go?
At the bottom.
Very bottom.
Bottom. And then where does the staff go?
Underneath the executive director box.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's it. The 4 board committees, 1, 2, 3, 4. Where do they go?
Underneath the board of directors.
Thank you. And the committees are different. The committees can be different for each and every nonprofit. Typically in your bylaws, there are a description of standing committees, and then there are some instructions around if you want to form committees. Typically that's in the bylaws. The description of the role of the executive director, I don't oftentimes see a description of that role in the bylaws, but I encourage you to include that in your bylaws. To have a description of the role of the executive director and the CEO, so that board members understand, what that role is and how it fits. The board of directors, the committees should be working in partnership with the executive director or the CEO, should be working in partnership. And also the executive committee. So at the top, and team, can we go to the filled in one? Thank you. So at the very top is where the board of directors is located. Well, the executive committee could go in parentheses under that, right? That's where the executive committee are the officers of the board. And we're going to show you this filled in so that you can see this. But this is in general, this is how we should think about the order of, or the way in which we work with a board. Oftentimes, the board of directors recruits and hires the executive director. Once we have an executive director in place, it is that individual's responsibility to lead and manage the nonprofit. That is their role. With support from the board of directors, i.e. the executive committee and or the committees in terms of how that's structured. Then we have staff, then we have volunteers. And obviously these are customized. This org chart is customized based on your nonprofit. Some of your nonprofit have one person, one employee. Some of your nonprofits have hundreds of employees. So it's important to really understand that. And also recognizing that there are subsectors of nonprofits. So, we have museums, we have colleges and universities, we have hospitals, we have various industries within the sector. But in general, this is how we are, from an org structure perspective, this is how we should be thinking about the placement of the board of directors. And to be clear, it is important that the board of directors and the executive directors are working in partnership. They're working collaboratively. They're working together. If that ever gets off, if conflict arises and it disturbs that relationship, oh my goodness, we find ourselves spiraling when that relationship is not maintained in a way that's productive to doing the work of the nonprofit organization. I'm going to pause there and we can go back to gallery team and just kind of give folks an opportunity to comment. Any comments, thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Nydia, is it Nydia?
The committees, the board committees, can we include people who are not from the board, do not belong to the board? Can we include volunteers also in the committees?
Yes, you can. And the guidelines for that should be in your bylaws. So if you decide that your formal, the way in which your board is going to function is, one, it's going to have committees, then two, there should be some guidance on how to create those committees.
Thank you.
And I see that happens quite a bit, with having a committee. Maurice, go right ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, doctor. My question is, for private nonprofits that are small, how many groups of people do you need until you develop a board? In your opinion, ma'am, your expertise, ma'am.
If you are a nonprofit and you are recognized by the Internal Revenue, you have board members.
Okay, and
You had to have board members in order to be approved for your
Approved.
501c3
Okay,
status.
all right, all right,
So, yes.
okay.
Anybody else? Any
Yeah, I
questions
was just
about?
gonna say, it was helpful to see because I think sometimes looking at the diagram, you're like, okay, this is how it should, right, be structured. But then when you see the work being done, sometimes it don't correlate with that. So it's just interesting to see, the structure and how it should be.
Is it Amira? Am I
Yes.
pronouncing it right?
Mhm.
Thank you for that comment, because here's where the management comes in. We know that when we are about our work, it takes on a life of its own, right? If we have an executive director or CEO in place and we have a board chair and/or we have a board chair and we have officers, the executive committee, those officers and that executive director or CEO should be working together so that when the work is happening, it is in alignment with our bylaws. Because we know when we get into our work, things take on a life of its own, right? We have committees, they have chairpersons of those committees. They're meeting, they're doing their work. Well, EDs and CEOs, it's our role to work with that board chair to help to keep all of our board members, whether they're officers or chairing committees or what their role is, it's important for us to manage that and for it to be in alignment with our bylaws. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
And I will tell you from experience, when we start to let our board of directors just kind of do kind of what they want, long term, that doesn't work out well for us. So when we are in that CEO ED role, we should be trying to work in partnership. And it may be that we're just bringing the bylaws out. This is how we're supposed to work. And this is kind of how we're supposed to do our work. Nydia, go right ahead.
In our organization, we have a board of directors and an executive committee, but the members of the executive committee are also directors. Is that okay? Like the members of the executive committee are also part of the board of directors.
That's correct. They're officers. That is correct. Yep,
So
that is
they're
correct.
directors and officers at the same time. Okay.
That's
thank you.
correct. That is correct. They have to be a board member first, typically. Typically, if they're serving in an officer role, they are board members.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
I'm going to move on to governance and oversight. Okay. So our job as a board is to govern and to provide oversight. And that is what we're held accountable to and for. That is what we're held accountable to. So team, if we could show 19. Thank you. And so what we did here is provided some prompts to just kind of think about what that means. So in terms of governance, our role is to protect this nonprofit. It's to steward the mission and the vision. It's to partner with the executive director. It's to share our skills, knowledge, and expertise. It's to ensure that we're compliant with legal requirements. We could add more here, but in general, we're there to protect this organization, right? By doing these things. And we're also there to work towards the success of the organization, of this 501c organization. We want to make sure that work is happening, that the work is taking place. We want to give the executive director feedback. We want to bring resources to the organization to do the work in various forms. And then we also are going to be accountable to the organization by way of the bylaws. And there's this expectation of accountability and transparency. We could add more. But again, we're working from the perspective of managing the board of directors. And in doing so, we should be lifting up governance and oversight. And these are some prompts to kind of help you to begin to kind of carve out what that might look like for your individual nonprofits, because it's going to look maybe a little different when you start customizing what does protection look like for your organization? What does success look like for your organization? Again, we're talking about management here. Governance and oversight. Governance and oversight. This can be challenging, you know, just depending upon the culture of your board, and also the individuals that are serving on our boards. The North Carolina Secretary of State's office and the IRS have expectations of us as it relates to board governance and board oversight. And so that's important for us to keep in mind. If we could go back to the gallery. I know I've got us going back and forth today, but I wanna present the information, and then I wanna kind of make sure we're all in lockstep here. So again, understanding what governance means and understanding what oversight means. Any questions there or thoughts there? The other thing I'll say too is it is I think sometimes it's helpful at board meetings when you share something like that resource that we just popped up on the screen, just as a little reminder. You know, this is why we're here. Or give your board, where are my board chairs in this space today? Where do I have any board chairs or folks that are serving on the executive committee that helps to do the agenda for the board meetings? You know, share that blank org chart. Take 5 minutes, pass it out to your board and ask them to fill it in. Because sometimes as board members, we get kind of stuck in just kind of doing and thinking the way we've been doing and thinking the work. And on occasion, we might be out of alignment. So it's good to kind of keep us aligned with what it is that we are doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Okay. I don't see any comments in the chat, team. I don't see any questions, and I didn't see any hands raised as far as the governance. And sorry, Mary Beth, go right ahead.
That's okay. I just, I want to give you a real life scenario of a board that I sit on in Cleveland, Ohio. Until recently, they had the leadership of the board had been there 20 odd years with no break. And this man's title was president and CEO, but they also had a paid executive director. And the board president and CEO was very controlling of everything that happened in the organization because he took the CEO part of that title very, very seriously. But to me, that seems like a broken board structure. So I'm definitely going to be taking some of these materials to that board. I've been saying it since I joined the board, but they've all been there for 20 odd years, so they're not listening to me. So having something like this that has the stamp of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, maybe will give me a little bit more weight.
Is that president and CEO, is he a founder of that nonprofit?
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just
He
curious.
is not. The founder
All right.
has passed away several years ago. But even before the founder passed away, this man is the one who kicked him out of the organization.
Okay. Gotcha.
So there's a lot
Gotcha.
of animosity. There was a lot of animosity from the alumni
Mhm.
about this person. So actually last year I called for his resignation.
Mhm.
And of
Mhm.
course I was overturned. Yeah,
Mhm.
they voted against me, but
Mhm.
for just recently he has stepped down. So now
Okay.
there's an opportunity to make some well-needed changes. And I think one of those needs to be that the title of that seat should not be president and CEO.
Understood. I agree. Thank you for sharing that example. Thank you. Again, it is important to reference your bylaws. It's important to reference your bylaws, and if there are amendments that you need to make or changes that you need to make, those can be made. However, to make those changes, there has to be an agreement of the existing board. So that there's that part of it, but if we can hone in on the bylaws, hold our board members accountable to what they signed up for, make sure they understand and you've presented the bylaws to them at the onset when they join. That's very important. That's very, very important to do that. Duties and expectations. Duties and expectations. Go in your workbook to page 32. We're going to do some hands-on work here in a minute, but go to page 32 and page 34 of your workbook. Does everybody have a workbook? Yes, everybody have their
Yes.
workbook. Good. All right, we're moving on. We are moving right along. So on page 32, we have what we identify as duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. And so this is expected of the board as a whole working together. And this is also expected, these duties are expected of each individual board member. And so this is also a piece of information that would be helpful to share with me when I join your board. So at the onset, it's important to start off with being informative to that individual as to what it is we're holding them accountable to and for. And so duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. When we think about how we are to show up as a board and what we are doing in general, because when we have an executive director or a CEO that we have hired to work in that capacity, their role is the day-to-day operations. That's what they're there to do, to lead and manage the day-to-day. And it is our role to provide governance and oversight by demonstrating our duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. When you look at this, when you look at these three ways of describing our duties as a board and as individual board members, are there questions that you have about what we are showing here?
I guess one thing, and I think this could be true of a lot of these categories, but the one that I see come up the most is, I guess, on the duty of loyalty one, is making sure that there's an understanding of exactly what conflict of interest means. Because I know that can show itself in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Samuel. Samuel, right? Thank you.
Yeah, Sam's
thank you
fine
for
too.
that. Sam, thank you. So here's something else to keep in mind. Thank you for raising that. When we set up our nonprofit, we were required to give to the Internal Revenue our conflict of interest policy. The Internal Revenue offers a generic kind of conflict of interest policy that you are expected to, that you can use for that purpose. But you can also customize your conflict of interest policy or procedures. If there is a conflict of interest, you can customize that for your nonprofit. It is included in the bylaws also. So notice I keep going back to that document, because that document informs how we manage the board. Okay, very important to do that. And what did I say earlier? We can amend our bylaws when we need to. So to Sam's point, we don't know what the future, has in store for us most of the time. And so situations occur. And when those situations occur, especially around conflict of interest, we don't necessarily cover all the bases when we craft that. If your nonprofit is 100 years old or 50 years old or 10 years old. But when we do that, we should pause, executive director, CEO, executive committee, we should pause to determine, do we need to amend our bylaws? Because we've had this occurrence, and does it need to be formalized as to how we handle it? So that's important to keep in mind as well. I am not forgetting that we are dealing with people when we find ourselves in these scenarios. I get that. But the starting point is, this is how we should work and this is how we should function. And you are right. It can get a little murky when it comes to conflict of interest. But I always say, keep it simple. Just keep it simple, you know. If we're operating in a way that's compromising and putting the organization in a state where it might lose its 501c3 or something else might happen to us, then we know that's not what we should be doing. We should not be doing that. I mean, so I think that is important to keep in mind. But executive directors and CEOs and executive committees, you're kind of the managers, like the lead managers, to help to keep us there. There's also, sometimes we have a confidentiality policy too. Conflict of interest and confidentiality policies are signed typically every year by members of the board, just as a reminder that we are agreeing to adhere to this. Any other questions about the duties? Duties of board, duties of a board member, duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. Let's make sure our board members are showing up for meetings. Let's make sure they're in attendance. We can fire board members if they don't align with the bylaws. And that should be in your bylaws also, you know, how to proceed should you find yourself in a situation where the board member is not in alignment with the bylaws. So that's important to keep in mind. Page 33. We've got a checklist of board responsibilities here. So as a board of directors, this is a list or a checklist of board responsibilities, and also as individual board members. This is also something that can be shared when you bring me onto your board. Orientation is important for new individuals who are new coming to your board, for us to explain to us what the foundational expectations are, just duties and expectations. I'm going to pause here. I've got a couple of these that I want to highlight, but I want to pause here for you to review this list. And is there anything that you say on this list you really don't really know what this means? And if it is, just unmute yourself and we can respond.
I'd like to know what serving as a court of appeal means in relation to this.
There are times, thank you, Martha. There are times when we might make a decision as a board, and then we might have a board member who is not in support of that decision. And so they might very well, especially if you're using Robert's Rules of Order, they might very well want to appeal a decision that was made. And so sometimes we as a board might find ourselves in that role of doing that. A lot of times it goes back to your executive committee. They'll decide, work together, try to decide on how to move forward. It doesn't happen often. I've not seen that happen often. Typically we can meet and we can make decisions together and we can walk away and everybody's good. But there may be an occasion. The other thing that I want to point out here too is there are times when personnel matters are brought to the board. And if we some nonprofits will have a personnel or human resource committee, some don't. And so we might find ourselves having to manage a grievance, or we might find ourselves having to manage a concern of a decision that was made potentially between individuals within the organization.
Okay, how about preserving institutional differences?
So here, this is really, there are times, I'll just use DEI, EDI right now. There, it is, we can agree to disagree, right? We can agree to disagree. And we should create a brave, safe space for that. And so when we say we're preserving our differences as a board, meaning the organization is the institution, we're preserving our differences in that way. And so we make sure we create a brave, safe space for people to voice their opinions, that there's a spirit of preservation as it relates to what people might share, what they might be concerned about, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Any others that are on that list?
I put a question in the chat, if you could speak a little bit more about representing the organization politically. I'm under the impression nonprofits remain neutral when it comes to politics.
So, yes, can you, where is it? Which one?
It's number 1, 2, it's the 4th bullet point.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can serve as advocates. So we can educate, we can inform, we can have meetings with elected officials. You know, we can talk about our organizations and what it needs. Those things we can do. And so as a board member, I might represent the nonprofit that I am serving on the board with. I might very well represent that nonprofit at a county commissioner meeting where we're maybe doing a presentation about resources that we need or informing them about something. I, as a board chair, might be contacted by an elected official to speak on behalf of that nonprofit organization. So think about it in terms of when there is a need for some engagement from a political standpoint. We're not lobbying, we are engaged in exchanges that is providing information.
Yes, and that makes sense. We do that. Thank you.
For example, years ago in my community, I was the board chair of our continuum of care to address homelessness in our county. That's a HUD kind of thing, right? And so, but I also chaired a board that had a homeless shelter. Okay, so there were times when it was appropriate for me to talk about housing children and families that are homeless. And there is representation on that board of elected officials. And so there were times when I might have to have a conversation about what it was that was happening at that particular entity. I'm not the chair of that anymore. I'm not even on the board of that anymore, but I'm a part of another network that supports that. So even now, I continue to sometimes be a resource in that way. So that's what we're talking about there.
Yes, ma'am. Doctor, the one of the questions I have is servicing as a court of appeal. It's fifth to the last on the bottom, I mean, to the bottom. Servicing as a court of appeal. What do they mean by that?
Maurice, I did share that a few minutes ago. I've already explained
Did
that.
you?
Martha asked that question. I did.
Wow.
But if you wanna stay on afterwards, I'll come back to it, but I don't wanna
Yeah,
repeat
please.
it.
I'm sorry. I probably was reading while she was talking. I apologize.
No worries at all. No worries
Okay.
at all. All right. Anybody else? Is there anything else there? Okay, so in general, think practical. I always say when it comes to working with our board of directors, think practical. Engagement of the board members, active board members. It is important to manage that. It is important to manage that. Executive directors, CEOs, if I'm on your board and there's something that you need that you think I can help you with, Ask me. Don't assume that I'm just gonna be able to read your mind and know that's what you need, because that's what I do. I may not. And so, and board chairs, if there's something that the organization needs, ask your fellow board members to help out in those ways. That's how we become engaged. That's how we become more active. And if I am a part of your board and I'm not willing to do that, then look in your bylaws to find out how you can help me to make an exit. Because you want people on your board that are there for the reasons for which you recruited them. That's very, very important. So any comments there before we go into our next piece of information? Oh, got a lot of content here before we get to our activity. Any team, I see some items in the chat. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything that is
No, I think we can continue on.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Oh, we got something? Something there? We good?
We're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Rebecca. If we could go to slide 21, please, team. And also for the, go to page 35 in your workbooks while we go to slide 21 on the screen. Go to page 35. Now, we've talked about what you see on page 35 already, but I want to align it with the bylaws and legal compliance. We've been talking about the bylaws and talking about the bylaws. And we want to show a sample of bylaws here in just a minute, but I want to point out some information to you. And so our bylaws and remaining compliant as it relates to our 501c3. In our bylaws, there's going to be instructions around term limits, how long I can serve, and in what ways I can serve. There's going to be information about conflict of interest. There should not be any type of monetary compensation for individuals who serve on a board of a 501c3. And then also legal compliance. So I want to highlight these areas in the bylaws. And so we're going to change the screen here and we're going to pull up some sample bylaws for you. And if you have your bylaws, if you have access to your bylaws, this would be a good time to pull those out too. Because this is where we find the information about how our board is supposed to function. And so we have some sample bylaws for you. And I just want to show you what this looks like for those of you who don't. The bylaws are typically arranged and organized in very similarly across nonprofits, but of course the bylaws are customized for your individual nonprofit organizations. So I want to highlight what these areas are. So each section of the bylaws are broken into what we call articles, and they're different. Each section has a purpose. Typically in the bylaws, you're going to see the name of the organization, and then you are going to see any type of information that speaks to the name. That's what you typically see there. And then what follows oftentimes is the purpose of the nonprofit. What your mission is for this particular nonprofit. They have some principles that they work by. So there are also some principles for practice. So there's the mission and there's the principles for practice for this nonprofit. Also, the membership of the organization. And we're talking about some nonprofit organizations have memberships, like associations have membership. I'll just, since we're there's a lot going on with basketball right now. So the NBA, the National Basketball Association, is a nonprofit. And so there are members of that association, which are all the basketball teams, the same for NFL, et cetera. The North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has members, right? It has members, individuals who can become members of that organization. And so that's that can be a section. It's different from nonprofit to nonprofit. And then meetings, there's instructions on when we meet. We have an annual meeting. There's information about how we inform about meetings, when our regular meetings take place, the location of those meetings, what makes up a special meeting if we have to have one, et cetera. You can keep going, team. And then how we vote is another section in the bylaws. And our order of business, like a general agenda, this is how business typically takes place. We identify who's present in some form. We talk about the minutes and we approve them. We report to committees, give reports. Officers might give reports. Old business, new business, adjournments, or your meeting agenda might be tailored differently. What I do encourage is to have an outline for your agenda and utilize that outline each and every time you have a meeting, so that your board members get accustomed to the type of information they're going to hear at the board meeting. Then in the next section is the board of directors. In this case, not less than 3 members. So the bylaws tell us how many members we are expecting to have on this board. You can keep going. There's a note here about the executive director and what they do. And then there is some description on how voting takes place, how vacancies are handled. You can keep going. The role of the secretary, a little bit there. There's a whole section, you can keep going, on the officers. And again, I encourage you to look at your bylaws. Come back. So there's the president role, the vice president role, the secretary, keep going. We're going to look at some of these job descriptions later too. The treasurer, keep going. You can keep going. We don't pay boards of directors. Executive directors are compensated, of course. There's some description here about committees, and then there's also a description here about amendments and how we go about amending the bylaws. And so again, bylaws, if you have access to your bylaws over the time that we're together, I would encourage you to review those bylaws and to try to make sure that they are current as it relates to how you work in your nonprofit. If you're amending the bylaws, date when the bylaws are amended, and so on and so forth, because you want to keep up with that. Thank you, team. Okay. That was a mouthful, right? Bylaws. Hold us accountable as your board members. Hold us accountable to what's in the bylaws. The second thing I want to show is I want to show we have a checklist at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, and it's titled a legal, not illegal, legal compliance checklist, legal compliance checklist. And I'm going to let the team share this with you. This is a resource that's available to individuals that are members of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. Rebecca, you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm going to pop the link in the chat just so you have access to it. We update this annually. If there are any major changes, we'll send out a revised version. It's free for members to download. There's a fee for non-members, but it is something that I urge and stress that all nonprofits should use and utilize to make sure that they remain in compliance. Not all, it's set up like a spreadsheet, but not all sections of it are required for all nonprofits. It depends. So you kind of go through, and once you know which ones you need to kind of check off the list to remain in compliance, it gets easier, but it is just a great tool, and we want to make sure that folks know about it, that it exists. And it's just a good resource to make sure you all are aware of. And then I was going to mention it later, but while I'm on now, I'll also mention we do have policy conversations that are taking place throughout the state. I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat as well. You all can check out, see if there's one that's close to you that you're interested in attending. These are in person, and they're well attended. They're led by David Heinen, who is our VP of Policy and Advocacy, who's fabulous. If you've ever had a chance to witness him in presenter mode, it's a great opportunity to connect with other folks in your area and learn more about issues that affect nonprofits. So especially in this political environment that we're in right now, I think it's never been more important for us to kind of be able to join together and to learn more about what's going on locally, as well as throughout our state. All right. Anything else you want me to cover, Dr. Palmer?
I was thinking you were going to the link. That's what for the checklist?
Oh,
No?
to actually show it. I can pull it
Yeah.
up if you'd like me to.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just as an example, let me open this up. Sorry about that. This is an example. I'll share my screen with you all.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And what I will say is that there's quite a bit to remember. So having the checklist is very, very helpful in terms of just remembering all that is just kind of want you to eyeball what this looks like. So if you go to the top, thank you. I just want you all to see how this is arranged. It's a nice quick reference. And so it's in the first column, it tells us, have you completed the following task? And then who has to do it? And then how and when to do it. And then there are notes that can be included there. So I'm not going through the whole list, but I just want you to see how that's noted for, and especially for those organizations that are new and you're just trying to get a good cadence with what the expectations are and how we go about performing these particular tasks to remain in compliance. So I just wanted you to see what that looks like and just the items that are listed. I think this is about a 20-page checklist, but it's very, very helpful in terms of just being able to kind of go through and be reminded of in terms of the nonprofit as a whole. But remember, a part of our responsibility as a board is governance, protection, to protect the nonprofit. So that's where this comes in handy. Thank you, Rebecca, for doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is actually the 2023 version, but just so you all know, it's been updated. There's an up-to-date version that when you download it or you purchase it, if you're a non-member, you'll have access to the updated version.
Thank you. Let's see. Take a breather, take a breath. I know we are sharing quite a bit, but in terms of, we're talking about procedure here. We're talking about management. And so it's the what it is that we are doing with some examples of how to go about doing these things. The next thing I want to highlight, and team, if we could go to slide 22. The next thing I want to highlight is I want to highlight the financial management and fundraising responsibilities. We will do a session on financial management, and we will actually have the Chief Financial Officer from the center join us for that. And we're also going to do a session on fundraising. And so a part of our responsibilities as a board is to be aware and to engage with the organization around the finances of the organization and how it's managed, and then also the fundraising responsibilities. And so I just want to highlight a few things here. We're going to do a deep dive into financial management and fundraising. Financial management, budgeting, the board of directors is responsible for helping to craft the budget. The treasurer is involved in that. The board of directors approves the budget. There's financial reporting that happens at every board meeting. We make decisions about the organization based on what's going on financially. We're expected to have an audit and do an annual report each year as it relates to the finances of the organization. And again, we're going to do a deep dive into this in a separate session. We do have fundraising responsibilities. The organization, most nonprofit organizations have a combination of an annual campaign that it does every year during a certain time of the year, and the board is expected to help out with that and participate as identified by the nonprofit organization. And then also the board is expected to, when we have fundraising events, the board is expected, or board members are expected to participate in that. We are by default, when we are engaged in the financial management of the organization and helping out with fundraising, we are bringing those resources in to pay for human resources, which is to fund our personnel, to fund our staff, and so on and so forth. So it's important for us to understand that we are working with the executive director or CEO or the nonprofit as it relates to all three of these. The fundraising responsibilities, I would encourage you to, if you don't already, that your board of directors has a fundraising committee and that you grow that committee to be really, really strong and really, really impactful. The executive director most times and the staff are not left to do that by themselves. The board is working with the staff and the ED to engage in and do fundraising. I will admit it takes time to build your capacity in this area, but just keep working at it, keep working at it, keep working at it. And it does pay off in the end, but it doesn't happen overnight. So you definitely want to make sure that you are working, that the board of directors and you and your individual board members are, they understand that there's an expectation as it relates to these things. The next slide prompts a break for us. BREAK, a break for us. And so we've covered quite a bit today. We have covered the duties and expectations, financial management and fundraising responsibilities. We have talked about funding human resources. We're going to do a little bit more of that in the next slide on the other side of the break. We're going to do a little bit more work around accountability and evaluation. We've got some hands-on tasks for you to engage in as it relates to that. And then also the evaluation of the ED and evaluating ourselves as a board of directors is another area that we're going to focus on. Just going to highlight some things about board composition. So we're going to take a break. Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you in terms of how long our break will be.
Yeah, let's plan to come back at 11:40, right on the dot. and we'll see you back here then. Thanks, Dr. Palmer.
Much break. I know we have done quite a bit today, quite a bit. The science of board governance and oversight, the science, the management of board governance and oversight. So give me an idea, what, right now you're thinking what about board governance and oversight? The science of managing a board, the management of the board. I'm just doing a quick check-in. What are your thoughts so far based on what we've covered? The management of our board of directors. Any thoughts come to mind? Anything sound useful? Anything gives you reason to pause? Anything give you reason to think differently about what you're doing? In a good way. I mean that in a good way. Let's see. Got a couple of comments in the chat. Cindy, can you talk to us? That's a long message in the chat. So do you mind giving voice to that?
Sure. Yes. Sorry. I tend to write novels sometimes. But
Thank you.
I'm laughing at the herding butterflies. Without expressing too much, my board is 32 members and it's not like herding butterflies. It's like herding fleas sometimes. Too honest. But so right now I am trying to like set expectations. We've got like 3 new board members, and we're going to be getting 3 new ones in November. So it's making sure everyone is on the same page right when they come in, because even if you could have somebody on the board who is there for 2 years and maybe how they're reading how your particular emergency funds are used is maybe they're not a finance brain, so they're not thinking about like the inner workings, and like maybe they're not an investment person, so they don't really care about how your organization is strategizing for the future of the school, especially if you have an endowment or scholarship programs. I think I digressed to a different track though, did I? Or is that adding more?
No,
Okay.
no, I just, thank you for adding voice. I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted to hear your voice on that, because you unpacked a lot and I didn't want to move away from that. But I think the gist of what you have here is capacity. You know, regardless of the number of people that you have on your board, if I am expected to engage in any facet of how the nonprofit works, I think it's important for us to train and provide TA to board members so that they are schooled on how to do that. Because I may be very seasoned at having a seat on a board for years and decades, but I may have never had to do any of the kinds of things that might be requested of me or that might be expected of me. And I'm really big on, if we want board members to help fundraise, then we need to build in time to train them on how to fundraise for your organization. right? Because I may fundraise over at ABC organization this way, but over here with your organization, I might need to do something a little differently. So building that in, I think is very, very important. And I think I thought I had the gist of where you were going, but I just wanted you to put voice to that. Because I think sometimes our expectations of that board members, because they are board members, that they know exactly what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. And that's not always the case. So thank you for giving voice to that. Crystal?
Yeah, so a couple of things that have helped herding butterflies. So with all the different kind of personalities, one thing that has been really valuable has been a couple of things is doing a DISC assessment. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that, but a personality assessment has been very helpful in learning. For me, I'm an executive director, but I also sit on a executive committee for another board. But learning their personality types and how to communicate effectively with them is what I mean. And you can herd some butterflies very easily if you know how to communicate in their language style. Because being direct with one individual might not work as well as somebody else who really needs a lot of explanation. And so being able to articulate in certain ways is very effective. But then also too, being able to, if you have a problem, coming with that solution is also very effective. Because a lot of the board members, they have other jobs as well. This isn't their only thing. And so if I can get them there for an hour and a half board meeting and say, hey, I've got this big problem, but I've got this also solution. Love your information, love your tidbits, but this is where I'm going with it. Do you guys have anything to add? Am I on the right track? Great, I'm on the right track. Or, hey, you might want to also try this. One that sprinkles in a little bit of information I need to add to it, but also too, it builds in buy-in and trust with me as the director. But then too, they don't give me as much of a hassle going forward with other decisions that I need to make. So that's been very valuable for them to also know my language whenever I need to make decisions going forward. So those are just kind of things that I've learned from the time being here that's helped me. Maybe that helps somebody else.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. And that is the art side of what we're talking about. And there is, it is important to have a good understanding of who your board members are, especially as the ED CEO, to have a really good understanding of who your board members are, why they are there, and what they bring. And then inviting them to engage is another aspect of what it is you shared. So thank you for that example. There are a variety of variables that are relevant when you are engaged in the interpersonal dynamics of working with your board, and who we are as individuals in that ED CEO seat or in that board chair president seat has a whole lot to do with how we navigate that and how we maneuver there. And so having a good understanding of that is definitely important. So thank you for sharing, bringing the art part of what it is that we're talking about. What I will say to that is I do think the leadership or the art of working with our board is highly contingent on understanding the management procedures of that board. So in order for us to be able to be that leader and kind of demonstrate the art and the interpersonal, work with the interpersonal dynamics, we also need to have a really good footing on what it is that we are expecting them to do. So thank you for that. In your workbook, I want you to go to page 36. I want to point out a couple of things, and then we're going to do a hands-on exercise here. Look at page 36, page 37, page 38. All of these go together. And page 39. Take a look at these three pieces of information. What we did here is we gave you ways in which a individual who is a board member, which we talked about that. We talked about the responsibilities checklist, but the vice chair, a committee chair, the secretary, treasurer. This can also be used if you need to update your bylaws. Like if you need to go to your bylaws and update what these roles are to do, this is a good resource for you to kind of go to and to pay attention to. Here's my experience, both as a ED CEO and then also chairing boards. If we can work with our board to help them to serve on a committee and or be an officer, I think that helps to build their capacity by default because they're engaged in a different way. So that's important to remember there. If we can foster a way for individuals on your board to be able to work in those capacities. So on page 36, we've provided a description for you there. Page 37. Let me go to page 38 for me. I want to couple that with page 36. We put the board chair description on a separate sheet from that other one because when we are recruiting board members, CEOs and EDs, when we are recruiting board members, and we should also be thinking about, can this board member ultimately serve as chair at some point in their tenure with us? Because we do want to have individuals who are chairing our board that can work in partnership with us and collaborate with us as it relates to the organization itself, carrying out the mission and vision. And so page 36 and 38 gives us that. The other thing I want to point out here is that there is a difference in what the role of the board chair is and what the role of the ED is. Go to page 39. The role of the board chair is to be the liaison between the board of directors as a whole and the organization as a whole, working in partnership with the ED. So we are supervising, guiding, working with board members as they are elected individuals on this board. And we're working with the executive director related to the board chair is related to the day-to-day operations. And we provided some examples of what that looks like. I do think it's important when you are onboarding a board member to really help them understand the difference in those two roles. The board chair, unless it's a unique situation, the board chair does not manage the day-to-day operations. That is the role of the ED or the CEO. And there's some specifics that go with that. So that's important for us to keep in mind and for us to understand. Board chair versus executive director. Board chair versus executive director. Sometimes board chairs are elected and they misunderstand what their role is. So it's important for us to help them to be clear about what that is. Go to page 37. The board of directors versus the ED. And here, over the years, and I've been working in this capacity consulting with nonprofits for about 30 years now. And what I find is that if we can ground individuals and what their roles are on a board, it will help minimize all kinds of situations in the future. So when you bring on a board member, orient me to the fullest, because I don't know what I don't know about your organization. You have to help me to be able to do that. And so there is a role for the board of directors as a whole. We've already talked about that. And there is a role for the executive director. We should be working in partnership. Boards of directors should be yielding to the bylaws and also should be holding in regard the role of the ED and or CEO, depending upon what that title is. So our board of directors, they are a body that provides leadership to that nonprofit. That executive director manages the day-to-day operations. And I think sometimes if we can kind of really be clear about that, we can better understand and minimize areas of digression in our work, if I could say that. All right, hands-on work I want us to do. Go to page 40. Some hands-on work. And you may have to reference the other literature, the information that we've shared. But I want you to kind of work through this activity for the nonprofit that you are representing today. So we're doing a little bit of a review of the executive director position. And the reason that we are honing in on this, because when we're trying to manage the work of the board and we're trying to have all the pieces in place to manage the work of the board, where we find us digressing in that is when we misunderstand what the role of the ED is, or the ED misunderstands what they think their role is. And so that's important. That's important to keep in mind. So I'm going to pause here and kind of let you complete this worksheet. And then I want to add voice to it. So I'm just going to pause here for just a minute and let you respond to these questions. And then we have another activity for us to complete before we finish today. Board governance is quite a bit of one-way communication here. It's governance, and it is practices and procedures and how we need to actually manage our board to yield engagement and activities from our board members. So I'm just gonna go quiet for about a minute or two and let you complete this worksheet. And if you have a question, you feel free to ask as well.
Doctor, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In our organization, thank God our board is very engaged and is excellent. Everybody does a great job, but we don't have staff or executive director. So I won't be able to answer these questions. I just wanted to know later if you can give us some some advice and to help us manage it.
Sure. Do you have a couple minutes to stay on after? Okay, good. Thank you.
Dr. Palmer, there's a question from staff in the chat. Is the last question about annual compensation referring to the ED or to staff or both?
It is I just wrote a note here myself. It was ED and or staff. I'm going to respond to both the ED and staff. All right, sounds like we're towards the end then, Rebecca, if we got that question, right? Towards the end of the worksheet. So let me just give you a few nuggets here in terms of how you respond. And I'd like you to use the chat to just kind of tell your response. Who hires the executive director? Let's use the chat for that. And team, I'm going to ask you to help with the chat.
Board of Directors, board of
Okay,
directors.
board. Yes, yes. Thank you. Yes. The board of directors takes lead on hiring the ED. The board of directors takes lead on hiring the executive director. It can happen in a variety of forms, right? It could be that the executive committee with the chair as the lead may actually facilitate that process of hiring the ED. Nonprofit organizations that have the resources, sometimes they hire a search firm to manage this process for them. Sometimes the board of directors or the executive committee, they might do a hybrid. It might be they take on some tasks themselves in terms of that process. And then there are times when they will bring on a search group to do a piece of it for them. So there's a variety of ways to do that. What I find is a lot of our nonprofits find it difficult to be able to afford a formal A to Z search committee to come in and do that for them. So typically it is the board of directors that takes lead there. Who hires the other staff? If you would put that in the chat for me, who hires the other staff? I see executive director, department heads. Yes, absolutely. So depending upon how large your organization is, the executive director is in on probably most every hire, unless you're a large entity, on the hires of the staff that come into the organization for the most part. If you're fortunate to have tiers, management levels in your organization, then of course, those responsibilities happen there. We don't typically engage board members in hiring of staff. That can foster some dynamics that might not work so well long-term. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Who can terminate the employment of the executive director? I would encourage you, as you are building out the board governance expectations around hiring, releasing, evaluating the executive director or the CEO, I would encourage some type of a formal work agreement. And you can consult with your HR committee if you have one, or personnel. Most boards of a nonprofit have an HR professional. Most of us try to recruit on the board or HR or personnel, a person with that background. And so I do think it's important to think about the formality of bringing on an executive director. I encourage it to be as formal as possible, because you want there to be some clear understanding about what those expectations are. And there are various options that you have to kind of solidify and to put a stamp on the arrangement that you have with that ED. But yes, the executive director, executive committee, the board, they typically, if there's a need to terminate the employment of the executive director, it happens there. And I'll go on to the next one. As far as staff, the same as above, the ED or the board. I mean, the ED is the one who is in the loop and handling the release of staff. Now, there may be some situations where your human resource committee or your personnel committee of the board, there may be some times where it's necessary to pull that person in. I chair a board right now. We have a HR committee. There's a chair of that committee. That's her profession. That's what she does. And we're getting ready to do an evaluation of the CEO. So we're working together. I as chair, she is the chair of that committee. We're going to be working together to do that. So that along with the ED, I mean, they're a part of that too. Do you feel that your governing board members fully understand the duties and responsibilities of the executive director? Yes or no? Give me a reply in the chat. Yes or no? Let's see what we have. Do we understand the role? Getting better. I see a no. Try to shore that up. It is very important. Things will go so much better when we as a board really understand that. I think just keep working at it, to make sure. Onboarding your board members is a good way to get it off to a good start. How often does the board chair meet with the executive director or should meet? How often should the board chair meet with the executive director other than at board meetings? What's your opinion on that? How often does the board chair meet or should meet with the executive director other than at board meetings? Okay. Whenever I am chairing a board, I prefer bi-weekly or weekly. That's my preference as the chair. Because I want to be in the loop. I don't want to be the last to know anything, good, bad, whatever. I don't want to be the last to know. I want to be informed. I want to be kept up to speed. Sometimes when I'm meeting with the CEO or executive director of a board that I'm chairing, I'm just listening. I might not even have a thought or an opinion, but I'm being informed. I am being made aware. And then I can also listen for if that ED or that CEO is in need of some help that might not be showing up at a board meeting. So that's kind of my preference. Here's what I will say about that. Make sure the chair and the ED or CEO, they're meeting on a regular basis outside of whatever you decide, outside of the board meeting. That's very important to do that. And then the compensation, annual compensation is determined by the board for the ED or CEO, and for the staff is determined by the ED. So that's important. Next activity. I think I have about 7 or 8 minutes left here. The next activity, our closing activity, is evaluating your board of directors. Evaluating your board of directors. Now, think about, as you're thinking about your board of directors, I also want you to think about the composition of the board too. Now, we talked about in the bylaws that in your bylaws, it gives a description of the composition. How many board members, representation in terms of board members and why they're serving or what roles they're filling, what skills you need, whether or not they have influence, whether or not they have connections. When you are crafting the composition of your board, desired composition of the board, that information is in the bylaws too. So keep that in mind. Here's what you want to make a note about composition. It can change year to year. As a matter of fact, what you need can change from day to day. Some of you know that well. It can change from day to day, but you want to be paying attention to what the nonprofit needs as it relates to the composition of the board and the representation that you need on the board. I mentioned earlier, most nonprofits that I've worked with they try to have a human resource or a personnel administration professional on their board. Because that is an area where a small to medium-sized nonprofit may not have that position. They may not actually have a human resource manager or a personnel administrator, or, they may not have that. And so they try to secure that on their board. So I will say in terms of composition, that HR personnel expertise, that's one that organizations try to have as a part of that. last item for us today, page 41, evaluating your board. So what we want you to do here is we want you to take some time there are 3 sections, and it goes pretty quick. It's really not long. It takes about 5 minutes to do sections 1 and section 2, more or less. But what we want you to do is we want you to focus on section 1 and section 2. You can jot some notes from section 3 if you get to that. But we want you to give us an idea of evaluating your board on a scale of 1 to 5 across these 10 items as it relates to needs improvement, which is a 1, or you're excellent, which is a 5. And then in section 2, we want you to respond to the item listed there. So I'm just going to go silent here for a couple of minutes and let you complete section 1 and section 2. So notice in section 1 that the way in which we are prompting you to respond to these items is about the organization as a whole. So we're prompting us to think about how the board is impacting what's happening in the organization or not. Because we are there as a board of directors and as board members to lift up that mission, to move the organization forward in the spirit of the mission, to achieve the vision and the goals. And so notice that's the way in which these prompts are framed for your response. So that's a big takeaway that we want you to take away from this, is this focus on the impact of the nonprofit on the organization as a whole. And so we should be, as a board, excellent at impacting the organization as a whole. Because we are a part of the team of individuals that are employed there, if we're fortunate enough to have, if it's not volunteer led, but if we're fortunate enough to have that in place, then that's a big takeaway. And if we look at these items and we are in ones, we got ones and twos, then we have some room for some improvement and some growth. And take baby steps. You know, don't give your board members some grace. Take baby steps, build up to having high engagement and high work and activity from your board. It takes time. Pay attention to those term limits, because when you have one year term limits, it's hard for a board member to really kind of give you what they probably could in terms of their service and being contributing to the success of the organization. Because sometimes it takes about a year to even understand what the organization does if they don't know. So pay attention to those term limits in terms of how long individuals serve on your board and how often you are recruiting and putting into place new board members. That can significantly impact the success you may or may not be experiencing. So pay attention to that and hold your board members accountable. That's section 2. You know, hold us accountable for being a part of the board, and help us to understand that and build it into how you're managing the work of the board. The last thing I want to pose related to board governance, after you wipe your brow, like, I know that was quite a bit, but it's important. And all these things matter to get us to where it is that we want to be. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I think that's important to remember. I want you to give voice to this. You can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat, whichever you choose. What makes you the most proud of your board? What makes you the most proud of the board of directors of the nonprofit that you represent here today? What makes you the most proud of them? And by all means, hearing your voice is invited.
Yes, ma'am. What makes me proud the most is that we're open to listen. A lot of folks on here, they wish they could just talk to their board members. But with me, you can definitely talk to me. So I feel I'm the most proud. I'm open to any suggestions.
Thank you.
This is DeWarren
Anybody?
Langley. I serve as a volunteer executive director and I work full time. So oftentimes when I submit requests to my board members, I need maybe like a 5-hour turnaround. And I'm just so thankful that they're always able to return things that I send to them, even though it's not in adequate time turnaround parameters.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to give voice? And we see the chat. Yep, go right ahead.
This is Amira. I would say just welcoming and engaging. So even when we have events around our organization and board members will pop in, it doesn't feel difficult to have a conversation with all of them. Like most of them are very engaging and reach out as well. So
Thank you. Anybody else? Show me with the reaction feature. Show me with the reaction feature on your Zoom dashboard. Give me a reaction of how you're feeling about your board, or what you think of your board, or the board of directors that I see a thumbs up, I see a hand clap, I see a smiley face, I see floating hearts. We need our board of directors. We absolutely need our board of directors. And for those of you who are in this space today and you are serving on a board, you're leading on a board, maybe it's multiple boards that you're on outside of the nonprofit that you represent here today, we are very appreciative of your service and for doing what you do for your community. This work, some days it's a heavy lift. But in the end, we're trying to work towards being a part of bringing resources to our community in a variety of ways. And so you should celebrate that. You should absolutely celebrate that with your board members, and you should actually celebrate that with the other boards and other committees and all the different things that I know that you're all a part of. Very, very important to celebrate. I'm a part of a board here as a member. I don't have a leadership role, but we start off every board meeting with a mission moment. Every single board meeting is started with a mission moment. And a couple of times we start our meetings with a mission moment and we ended our meeting with a mission moment. Because the work that we do, the agendas that we have, the types of decisions that we're making, sometimes we kind of forget that we are accomplishing so much, and it takes our board of directors in order for us to be able to do that. So thank you for your reactions to that. I saw, makes me smile to see that your boards are working in a way that gives you the opportunity to talk about what you are proud of. The last thing that I will say is for next week's, and I know Rebecca's going to do this in the close, but for next week, make sure you bring a blank piece of paper, colored pencils, markers. We're going to kick off the day or the session with a hands-on activity that is going to take about 20 to 30 minutes at the beginning. So you're going to need a blank piece of paper. You're going to need, if you have crayons or if you have colored pencils or if you have something like that, or if you have scented markers, that might make it even more interesting in terms of what we're going to have you do. But you're going to need a blank piece of paper and you're going to need something to do some creative work with. And so today we know it was a lot of information out. Next week it'll be a lot more hands on. And right now you're feeling what? Right now you're thinking what? We started and finished board governance. Next week, we will be working on program design, management, and evaluation. So we're going to be talking about programs and services of nonprofits next week. What are we thinking right now? Help me to understand. How are you departing today? More grateful for my board. That's nice. That is absolutely nice. Right now you're thinking what? I got 5 more sessions of Dr. Palmer giving me all this information. Gratitude. Thank you. I see quite a few comments in the chat. Great, great, great. Wonderful. Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. We did have a question, just if somebody could describe or give an example of a mission moment?
Oh, success. Something that you want someone to give one. I got you. Go for it.
Yeah, somebody asked in the chat for an example of a mission moment so they could drive it home. Allison, were you about to unmute?
Sorry.
Yeah, we do mission moments at most of our meetings anyway, as long as time allows. But we actually just had one this past meeting, last week, our board meeting. We completed a workforce development event with our local school districts, and so we just gave it a kind of an analysis of how the event went. And Jess, who's on the call with me as well, she was in charge of the event, so she kind of was able to fill in some of the organization organization parts of what we did, but really discussed a lot of the impacts it had on our students and the impacts it had on our employers who are the members of our chambers. So we just kind of gave a little case study about it, and that was part of our mission moment. But we've also done things like share about our chamber ambassadors or any of our volunteers that support our programming, things like that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. These are all really good ideas and examples. And Allison, who are you with again?
The Cabarrus Chamber
That's
in Concord, North Carolina.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, just wanted to close this out here. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing. I put the evaluation in the chat. I'm also going to add the link once again for our LinkedIn group. If you haven't joined yet and you're interested in doing so, we invite you to do that. It is a closed group, so you basically will request to join, and we'll approve that, and you can go ahead and start to connect with others on the platform there, respond to some conversations, get creative with it, upload things if it's something that's inspirational, if it's something that's related to an upcoming topic or one we've already discussed. If it's a question that you have that you're still kind of struggling with or not sure how to wrap your head around it, feel free to pop that in there. It's a good space for that. Next week, we'll have our session on program design, management, and evaluation. And as Dr. Palmer mentioned, that was one that a lot of people had highly ranked for different practices that they are planning to sort of work on or wrestle with a little bit over the coming year. So we're excited to work on that. Final reminder, make sure you bring paper and colored pencils for our next session, because we'll be using those. And I want to go to the last slide here real quick just to mention we've broken up our member benefits by topic area. So for those of you that are members or considering membership, these are some of the things that we can provide to our members that are related to the session topic of board governance. Obviously, one of our most popular benefits is pro bono program, and certainly getting a legal consult or a coaching consult, as well as just member assistance. If you have a question about anything related to boards, we're happy to help point you in the right direction. We do have our publications you see here that fall under board governance. We have a guidebook on under our publications on our website. As well as some other things that you see here in Info Central. That's our online resource library for members only. And then we also have Money Saving Partner, which is with Nonprofit Quarterly, which our members get $10 off their annual subscription and renewals. So I did want to mention, and in our extranet, which is where we have our, well, let me see if I can pull it up here. Here we go. I'm going to take over and share my screen real quick before we close out. Thank you, Leslie. Let's not share. One thing in our extranet, which we share in our wraparound emails, is this handy dandy member benefits PDF, and it's by topic. So you see board governance is here. You've got strategic planning and program design, management, and evaluation. These are all linked within that PDF. So if you're a member, please download this to use as a guide throughout the course. It's a great tool for you to find extra resources and ways to access your member benefits. And as always, if you're interested in membership or anything, you can always contact us at membership@ncnonprofits.org. And with that,
A quick question:
ahead
where do we find this again?
it's in the extranet. So when we share the wraparound email, which goes out from us, it'll either come out today or first thing tomorrow morning. There will be a link in it to our wraparound materials, and it takes you to this. It's a link to an extranet folder on our share drive.
Okay.
And you'll find, if I can go there, let me show you real quick.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yep. So within you get a link to this folder. You see session 1 wraparound, session 2 wraparound, for instance. We'll be uploading the slides. You'll find the results and finding that we shared in the chat. And then any of the other handouts that we may have shared or just want to include here for you all to see, you can download, you can access resources, that sort of thing.
And this is going to be where again? The wraparound, you said?
Yeah, we send the email after each session to everyone in the course.
Okay.
And it has a link to the recording, it has a link to this extranet folder, anything we want to share that's relevant or timely.
All
Yep.
right. Thank you,
Yeah,
ma'am.
good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, we'll go ahead and close. We'll wrap up with our recording. Folks are welcome to stay on if you'd like. If you have any further questions or want to have any clarification on anything, we'll stick around for a few minutes. Thanks so much. Thanks, Dr. Palmer. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. It was good to see you. Take care.
You all have a
Happy
good
Earth Day.
week. Take care.